let's hit it right off the bat with Ole Miss going for the trifecta against Alabama. So this game has not cost the Tide from getting to Atlanta and the college football playoff, but it's marred their season the last 2 years. Bama, a 10.5-point favorite, David, at Ole Miss. Your thoughts about this one?
I really just want to see, going back to that Florida State game, how the Ole Miss offensive line comes through and plays, because that second half of that FSU game, their offensive line got abused. So I think the real matchup right now is the Rebels offensive line versus the Crimson Tide front seven. It was kind of a weakness versus strength is kind of what I want to see now. USC had 4 and 5 star guys all over the field. So they gained 64 yards of rushing. Western Kentucky, 22 carries for 23 yards. So this Alabama front seven going against this Ole Miss offensive line, new look Ole Miss offensive line. I thought FSU's defensive line would control the game. I pretty much think Alabama's front seven is going to do the same as well. But Chad Kelly can make a play. That's the saving grace I think Ole Miss has with the injuries piling up. I just think that there's going to be it's going to have to be on Chad Kelly. I don't see a running game coming out for Ole Miss and giving him any help. I want to see what happens. Also, what happens if Ole Miss gets up big? Much like the FSU game. And so, can they keep it going? There's so many ways to go with this game, and of course, you mentioned the trifecta. Is Saban really going to get beat 3 times? I can't see it happening. I think I heard today that Joe Tiller back in Purdue was the only coach Nick Saban has lost to 3 times. So that was, that's very interesting to go there. Can Hugh Freeze do it? I don't think the run game is going to magically start to show up against this Bama defense, and I don't think Chad Kelly can do it by himself. With Alabama's eyes, focus for this game. We saw Saban kind of go crazy this past week, so I really look for Alabama and their front seven to really control the Ole Miss offense. It'll be a game in the second half, but I think Bama pulls away in the fourth quarter.
All right, Mike. David said one thing that if you would summarize everything he said that really caught my attention was that Chad Kelly probably has to shoulder way too much in this game. That's at least my first thought about this matchup in Oxford.
Yeah, Mark, we saw Chad Kelly have some success against FSU, and then he went from Chad Kelly to Bo Wallace. And they used to say good Bo, bad Bo in Oxford. And in that FSU game, Chad Kelly was good Chad, bad Chad. Look, I think David hit the nail on the head. The lack of running game concerns me for Ole Miss. Bama's front seven will focus on shutting that down. They will make Chad Kelly make plays, and he's not going to make enough plays against that Alabama defense. The secondary will be able to defend the pass game, and the knock on the Saban defense used to be they couldn't defend mobile quarterbacks. Well, I think they've proven that wrong in the last couple of years. Of course, Chad Kelly had success last year. They shut Deshaun Watson down. They've had success against Auburn's dual threat quarterbacks. I think Saban has schemed that. I don't think there's any way he's going to lose 3 in a row to Ole Miss. I like Bama, and I like Bama big.
Chad, we looked at Ole Miss's schedule during the offseason a number of times and really looked at these FSU-Alabama games as being the first 2 of 3 and a really rough ride for Hugh Freeze in terms of trying to gain some momentum this season. And, boy, they looked so good that first half against Florida State. It came crashing down on them. They got the break against Wofford to be able to regroup, but now it's right back into the fire against Alabama. So your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Mark, this is interesting because then they've got Georgia next, and so this is a tough game. You gotten squeezed here. Florida State, we talked about this before. I believe this last week. The negative part about having to play a team like Florida State is that Alabama has some solid film on you in preparation. They talked about it today on the teleconference. Saban and Freeze both talked about this to an extent about the preparation. Freeze, pointed out the fact that they've been rotating 9 offensive linemen so far the last couple of games, and so that tells you that that's going to be a focus because Saban had pointed out and said the same thing in a different discussion manner and a different question where the experience wasn't there at the offensive line where they've seen it before. So I think that's going to be an area of focus for this for Alabama. They're going to try to put as much pressure up front and try to get to Kelly as quickly as possible. We've seen Williams constantly over and over again. I mean, he's manhandled quarterbacks after quarterbacks. I mean, it looked like he went all WWE last week on Western Kentucky's quarterback at one point, slamming him. So I think there's going to be a lot of physicality up front with this Alabama team. I like Alabama in the aspects that I feel like They're not going to try to lose a third one straight. But that being said, this is in Oxford. And, I know Mike has pointed this out before with as much that's went on in turmoil-wise in the offseason, and then having to go through and having a loss against Florida State, mentally, where is this team at? And so I feel like that there's a lot of pressure on this game. I feel like on this team nationally. And look, it's hard to keep social media and media in general out of your locker rooms with these kids nowadays because there's so much accessibility. And so you got to think that they're reading some of this, they're hearing some of it. This Ole Miss team, yes, it's talented. And yes, you got up big on a Florida State team that's possibly going to be in the 14 playoff at the end of the year, but you couldn't hold on. And I think that's a big problem. And I think Alabama's going to review that tape. They're going to see some weaknesses, and they're going to see some areas. They're going to be able to see some weaknesses that they're going to be able to exploit with a guy like Hurts, who is mobile and who's going to be able to make guys miss. And they're going to try to get the balls out in the flats. They're going to try to make this defense focused in one area, and I think they're going to try to make them miss. So, I like Ole Miss because they're at home, but in this game, I can't think that there's going to be a team that's going to beat them for a third time in a row in the SEC. So I'm going to pick Alabama on the road this weekend.